My name is Indi Sinclair, and this is Chance for Her. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. My name is Indi Sinclair, and this is Chance for Her. No matter who you are, where you are, or why you came, I am just so happy that you are here. Adulting, and I think going through life, obviously forces us to understand this concept of life and death, right? So walking through life, living your life, and then ultimately one day realizing that the life that you know to be your life will one day no longer exist. And I think the concept of life and death is pretty simple. While it's deep, while it evokes a lot of emotion, one of the things that comes from this conversation is grief. And I think while I'm sure we all, or you all, have had your own fair share and your own experience with grief, especially when experiencing the loss of someone, whether it be a loved one, whether it be a friend, whether it be a dream, because I'm a firm believer that you can grieve anything in life. I think there's a specific type of grief that life doesn't prepare you for, that there's no way to mentally prepare for, and that is this idea of ambiguously grieving someone. It's very complicated when you are faced with a decision or faced with a situation in life where you have to grieve somebody who never died. There was never a funeral. There was never a celebration of life. There was never a memorial. There was never a finality. There was never a moment that you can pinpoint and say, from this moment on, I began to grieve, the way you would if someone were to no longer be living in the flesh. And I think that's such a hard topic to discuss and a hard topic to put language to and to sit with, because it forces you to understand that maybe you never fully had someone, maybe you never fully had that quote unquote relationship, and I use that word lightly because it's applicable in so many areas, but the way that you felt or thought that you might have had them. Because when someone is still alive, you still have access to them. You can still pick up the phone tomorrow and call them. You can still go visit them. You can check up on them on socials. You can see what they're doing on LinkedIn. You still have an in to their life. But when you realize that you never actually had someone or never actually had that relationship in the way that you thought you did, you start to grieve. And you're not grieving a loss, but you're grieving an absence of what never was. And I think when we sit and we unpack that, it starts from childhood, right? Because I am a firm believer that the ways in which and the people of whom loved you throughout your childhood and showed you what love looks like from a very young age warp and shape your idea of love as a teenager and eventually as an adult. And I think that as a child, it's a very interesting dynamic because we never evaluated and we never questioned love. I never once sat as a child and tried to figure out to what extent does my mother and father love me? To what extent do my teachers and all of my friends care about me and love me? I never had a scale to put them on for the amount of love that they were able to give to me. I also never questioned love. Whatever I was given or afforded as a child in regards to love and in regards to care, I just learned to equate with said relationship. So the love that mom is able to give may look different than the love that grandmother is able to give, and so forth and so on. But without realizing it, what I was doing from a very early age was learning how to adjust my needs just to maintain what I knew relationships to be at the time. And I think as an adult now, looking back on it, it's something that I wish I didn't do, but it's something that kind of had to happen, because I think the same way how parenting doesn't come with a handbook, neither does being someone's child. You learn to love people where they're at. You learn to meet people where they're at. And you also learn to not even just alter your needs, but alter your capacity to fit wherever you're at in life. And I think it's easy in those moments and in those seasons to become accustomed to or to become proud of the small efforts, right? So we fall in love, and I think we talked about this in some earlier episodes, but we fall in love with the potential instead of the consistency. We fall in love with what we think this relationship should look like instead of what it actually is. And at some point in life, and this is why I say I think grief is just so weird, you hit this roadblock where you realize, like, this will never look the way I need it to. This will never feel the way I need it to. You also reach a place where you're able to acknowledge, and even if it does, even if this person changes, even if this person grows, even if this person evolves, so much time has passed, so much hurt has been done, so much trauma has been experienced to where I needed you to be that for me maybe like 5 or 10 years ago. And what I needed from you, you can no longer offer me here at 24, 25, 26, as an adult. And I think that's just a really, really, really big lesson. I think it's also important to emphasize the fact that as we know grief in the sense of death, right? Like life versus death, we also know that grief comes and goes in waves. It has a really, really, really strange way of sneaking up on you. And I think it just depends on whom or what you are ambiguously grieving at said time. But grief has this way of making you feel like everything is okay, that I have come to terms and made peace with the fact that this relationship will never look the way that I want it to look until you see something on social media, until you hear a certain song, until you smell a certain scent, until a certain holiday passes, until you are reminded of what that relationship could have been, and now you find yourself back in those stages of grief where maybe you are bargaining, maybe you are willing to be in denial, maybe you are willing to, again, adjust your needs just for the sake of having someone in your life. And I think the older I get and the more I, just being transparent, go through therapy and learn to heal throughout this specific ambiguous grief that I'm dealing with in my own life, I'm learning to stop waiting for something that may never happen. I'm learning to stop bracing for impact and to stop putting myself in situations where I allow what I've always known to be detrimental to me, what I've always known to be hurtful to me, to still have access to me. Because I also firmly believe that somebody is able to love you like fully, but that their capacity may not reflect or emulate your capacity or your definition of love. I think that it also takes two people when we have this conversation about relationships and about when you reach a point of ambiguously grieving. I don't think that it's something as black and white as there was a situation that happened and because of said situation, I'm now grieving said person. I think it's way deeper than that. Because I think, and I actually was speaking with a friend as of recent, just in one of our candid conversations, and he said something that really stuck with me. And I think it's, you never know to what extent certain experiences impact people. Like, surface level that if I experienced trauma as a kid, that might trickle over into my relationships and might cause trust issues and so forth and so on. But nobody knows to what extent that altered my brain chemistry, that altered my nervous system, that altered my expectations of people. And I think that's a really important thing to understand as an adult, is to stop taking things so personal throughout this process of ambiguously grieving someone. It's okay to grieve the idea. It's okay to grieve the absence. But I think you have to remember that you never actually lost something in that process. You can't lose something that you never fully had. And I think that's a weird concept because, again, we're speaking about someone or something that is very much living, that I can very much still keep tabs on, that I can very much still kind of circle back to. But you reach a place where the person is still living, but the relationship has died. The expectation has died. the boundaries are now in place. And the boundaries are not in place to like keep them over here and I'm over here, but the boundaries are in place simply to just protect your own peace. And so that you can continue to live and create space and open up space for the people in your life who are actually there to love you in the capacity and the way in which you deserve to be loved. I think one of the unfortunate things about this conversation, especially as I talk through it and as I think through it, in this space, is that sometimes though, after all of this, right, like after we dissect what ambiguous grief is, and after we dissect where it comes from and why it happens and how there's all these different stages of grief and so forth, that it's okay to admit that clarity may not bring you peace. That you can fully understand a situation through and through. You can understand that, this relationship or whatever was not meant to sustain or whatever the case may be, and still be not happy. So I don't think that this specific episode or this specific conversation comes with the happy ending that some of the others do. I think it's just a very transparent and vulnerable space to admit and put language to the fact that I have people in my life, I have relationships that I've experienced in my life that I, to this day, pray for them to look different. That I, to this day, pray for those people's well-being, for their health, for their sanity. But I'm able to also understand at the same time that I never actually fully had them in the way that I thought I did. And that's a hard pill to swallow, but I think it's okay to experience situations in life where there is no happy ending. There is no solution. There is no advice. Sometimes this is just what it is. And in those seasons and in those times, at least for myself, where I find myself experiencing these phases of grief, I choose to surround myself with love. I choose to surround myself with people who I know love me and care for me and have the capacity to embrace me with open arms. But I also am trying to be better at not deflecting from how I actually feel too. Because I think after a while of being disappointed from whatever, from whomever, you start to condition yourself to believe that you're not worthy of being loved in the way that you should be loved. Or that this is just what it is, and because said person was incapable of loving me in the way that I needed to be loved, everybody is. I used to find myself saying that a lot, like because X couldn't do it, I don't trust nobody. I don't expect anything from anybody. And I quickly am learning, because it's a process, that will lead you in a very miserable and lonely place in life. To feel like you are to go through life alone just because someone or something couldn't get it right. So I would love to know, from you all as you watch this episode and as you process the conversation, what your thoughts are on ambiguous grief, how you dealt with ambiguous grief, how you're currently dealing with ambiguous grief. And I think I ask in all of this that you just give yourself grace as you walk through life, because I think grief is twofold. And while losing someone in the flesh is a very, very, very detrimental thing, I think losing someone from a mental standpoint can also do something to you as well. So that's where we're at. I hope you all remember, though, that in the midst of all of this, in the midst of your own processing and your own just putting language to the things that you're feeling, that you're navigating through life, that you remember that the light that you seek in this world has always been within you. It's just up to you to find it and let it shine. So my name is Indi Sinclair, and this is Chance for Her.